All right. Calling back into session the Tacoma Park City Council. We met earlier today in a closed session to receive a briefing on council safety protocols and emergency plans. The meeting was closed due to pursuant to Annotated Code of Maryland General Provisions, Article 3305B10. And now we are moving forward with our main event today, which is our budget work session. Just as a reminder, tonight we will be discussing the operations budget and the capital budget, the city manager, communications, city clerk, human resources, finance, and information systems and recreation. Just as a reminder, we will be meeting again on Wednesday, April the 19th. And during our meeting on Wednesday, we will be starting at 6:30. Just want to make sure I'm right about that. Yes. Wednesday, 6:30, just to remind everyone, where we will have a presentation on mental health crisis counselor pilot program and memorandum of understanding with Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. We'll also have a public hearing, which starts at 7:30 on the proposed FY24 budget, as well as a couple of tentative voting sessions on the single reading ordinance authorizing the purchase of procurement of the police vehicles. And then we will have a continuation of our budget work sessions dealing with the operations and the capital budget. So with that, I am going to turn things over to our acting deputy city manager, Mr. Eubanks, to lead us through tonight's work session.
Cool. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council, to city staff, and members of the public. Today, we are going to discuss the next step in our budget process. As you know, on Wednesday, we discussed in what I hope was pretty good detail the proposed budget from City Manager's Office and city staff. And this evening, we'll be discussing the operations budget and CIP budget for a number of city departments, mostly internal, but also including recreation. And then we will be continue the conversation with the rest of the city departments on the 19th, Wednesday. So the agenda for this evening, as I said, we'll talk mostly about the operations budget as well as the capital improvement budget for city manager's office, legislative office, which includes city council, city clerk, human resources, finance, IT, communications, and recreation. Wednesday, we'll talk about public works, police, library, and HCD. But we'll begin with just a brief recap of some of the budget highlights that we discussed on Wednesday. So a review of some of the budget assumptions. And again, we talked about this in depth, but just to kind of prime the discussion and ensure that this is all in the back of your minds while looking at the CIP budgets and operations. This is FY24 is a maintenance of effort budget. And essentially, the effort here is to preserve the existing level of service while also incorporating all the things that are required for us to keep that level of service. So there are capital improvement projects, equipment purchases, things that we need as a city in order to operate and continue to perform at the level that we perform or expected to. We also have, as a part of our personnel costs, a substantial increase in insurance. This is a estimate, 15% increase is an estimate based on information that we receive from our insurance broker. It is a very large estimate or a very large increase, but the potential for it to be realized is somewhat likely. I couldn't put a percentage on it, but I say that because last year we realized a 12% increase in workers' comp. And as I said on Wednesday, we have historically been below the market in terms of adjustments on an annual basis. So we're operating in the 3 to 5% range year to year. The market itself is seeing adjustments to insurance costs in the 7% range. And so the expectation is that at some point we may see a correction, and that correction would be substantial. And so this 15% increase is to hedge against any potential increases so that they won't be unexpected.
David, I'm sorry, point of order. Like, is this conversational or is it presentational? Because I have a question about that part. Are you talking healthcare costs or?
Councilmember Small, if you could please just wait until you're acknowledged. There are other lights before you.
I just,
Is your light on?
no, I'm just asking about protocols. I didn't know if you were
That,
talking or presenting.
that actually was my question, and I think I'm the one that had the light on,
Okay.
was whether there was a question that I should ask now, or should I just?
Sure. So,
So the
I
question,
was
the question is on the 15%, was, is that, have we heard from the insurance company, the health insurance company, that being one of the biggest? And if not, when do we hear?
So the policy is up for renewal at the end of May.
Thank
So
you.
we will hear from them before the budget after the budget's finalized, but before the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilmember Smalls, to answer your question, I think it'd be most helpful to go through the entire presentation. But I think too, if there are questions just about a recap of anything that I could just clarify, we can do that. So that's insurance costs. The other things to note, there is a 2% wage increase assumed as a part of the FY24 budget. But there are, as I said, substantial personnel cost increases. That includes the 15% insurance adjustments. And so typically, local governments, public entities will use the ECI as an adjustment factor. And so the ECI takes into account all personnel costs, not just wages. And so when you take into account all of the increases in personnel costs and compare that to the ECI, from which data is most recently available, which is December 2021 to 2022, our increase are above the ECI. One other point to keep in mind is that the FTEs for FY24 remain constant, but we have removed all of the interns with the exception of 2. And those are 2 interns that we have hired in FY23 that will carry over to FY24. And we saw some relatively modest, I think in the scale of the entire budget, cost reductions from that in the range of about $200,000. And then finally, this budget assumes a 3-cent tax increase. So historically, not historically, but for the last 4 years, the tax rate has been the same, and for years prior, it has been lower. And so the impetus for the 3-cent increase is mostly to adjust for what we'll talk about in a second, which are factors that have led us to a reduction in our fund balance. And as we heard from the financial forecast analysts, the trajectory is not positive in the long run. And so the proposal from the city staff is a first step in the right direction. It is not by any means one-size-fits-all solution, but it is a step in that direction to solving and improving the city's fiscal position. And that 3-cent increase, if you look at the median priced home, which is $650,000, the assessed value of a home that has a market rate of about, a market price of about $650,000 is about $430,000. And so if you look at that impact on a home of that median home value, the impact is about $220 a year, or about $20 a month. Okay, and then finally, I'll just run through this quickly. The total budget expenditure, that's all, including all funds, is $44.6 million. Revenues for all funds, $34.17, with about a $10.5 million, what I'll call gap, that's funded by bond reserves and other reserves. And then when you look at the general fund, which is where most of the city's activities come from, we have expenditures of $32.2 million and revenue of $29.3. And again, that balance, that difference, that delta is covered by about $1 million in bond funds. That's for the library renovation project, and then $1.7 million in other reserves. And then the chart to the right there just shows you if you look at as of June 30th, 2024, it shows you the balance that we expect at the end of FY24. Just before that are the reductions from the budget. So you'll see both the $1.6 million reduction from equipment replacement reserves and then the $1 million deduction from the bond reserve. Now, I mentioned during last week's discussion that one of the, I think, best meters for as a measure of the health of the city's financial fiscal position is the fund balance. And so I'll come back to this slide in a second, but this slide here, the reserve fund balance, what you'll see is that, and it's showing the actuals between 2016 and 2022, what you'll see is really interesting to me. You have a balance of $986,000 beginning in FY 2016. That is net of the bond balance. You reduce that because those bond dollars are borrowed funds. And so you really want to know the capital balance here. And so that 986 in 2016 gives you the capital balance. What you'll see is a decrease in the fund balance from 2016 all the way until 2021, right? And so you're adding in 2016 and 2017 and 2018, you're adding to the fund balance, but at decreasing amounts. And then finally, you turn negative in 19, 2020, 2021. In 2022, we see an uptick, but as we mentioned before, that is substantially due to hiring freezes, delayed projects, all of which were intentional to prevent the further decline of the fund balance. But in FY24, if you look to the projected, we're projected to again see a decrease in the fund balance. So again, this is an attempt to stop the bleeding, and so that's really what this budget is purposed for. All right. So moving on to the capital improvement budget, this is just as a primer to the discussion. We'll just talk about generally what the capital improvement budget is, and then after this go into some of the details of the operating budget and talk about capital improvement specific projects for the departments that we are discussing today. So the capital improvement budget is a 5-year period, covers a 5-year period, and it includes expenses or assets rather that are greater than $5,000 and for a period of more than 5 years. And so they cover 6 categories. Equipment replacement, which is the longest of the categories that we look at. It really projects out to 30 years. And it typically includes things like large machinery. So we're talking aerial lifts, we're talking trailers, things of that sort, and vehicles. So the full gambit of vehicles, so everything from police vehicles to trash trucks. Second category is information communication technology improvements. Park development facility improvements really include small scale improvements, so we're not talking about things at the scale of the library. We're talking about much smaller things like 2 items that are on the FY24 budget, the front gate replacement of the Public Works facility, which has been broken for quite a while, and the cable TV office expansion. And we'll talk about that in some more detail today. Infrastructure improvements are also included in the capital budget. So those are your street rehabilitation projects, bike infrastructure, sidewalk construction, traffic calming, all of the things that you would typically associate with infrastructure projects managed and overseen by Public Works. And then in the same vein are stormwater management projects. This is just a breakdown of capital improvement projects by source. So you'll see at the bottom on the left-hand side, the total number of capital improvement projects for the year, 9.2 million. And this is showing the reserve or fund that money is coming out of. So some of these numbers will look familiar. We just saw them on some of the previous slides. And then the largest of the reductions from the fund balance this year at 51.4% is the ARPA-funded projects. And just another chart just to give you a visual sense of the expenditure of the capital improvement program. Again, the largest expense here at 49.1% is related to the library, followed by Public Works. So a lot of those infrastructure projects for the year. Okay, operating budget. I'm going to move pretty quickly through the operating budget. A lot of our internal departments are largely personnel. Yes, sir.
I do have a general question about where we've been up to this point. I'd just like to remind you that given the nature of the gap financially, that it would be helpful to the council in evaluating how we're going to move forward if we did know what was on the schedules for improvements specifically. So I know that means some director level conduct besides Director Chen, but you can't make decisions without that kind of stuff. That's all.
So is that, are you looking for just the, yeah. Here?
See how this is all divided up?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we presuppose what the library is. We presuppose what police is. And we've had several very specific meetings in which, we've had several very specific presentations from the police chief about direction of the police department and where they're spending money and those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. Insofar as we have some policy-related decisions to make about spending things, it's important to be able to know where people are spending money. For example, recreation and stormwater having a dedicated fund is a little bit different, but recreation, communication, and public works all are spending money. In particular, we got $2 million, $2.5 million, or $2 million coming out of public works, and we just don't necessarily know what they are.
So these are, I appreciate the question. These are capital improvement projects, and so in the proposed budget is the full list of all of, and description of all of the capital improvement.
Okay, what page is that on
projects.
for people who are at home that may want to be interested?
Susan, do you know offhand?
Yep, it starts on, so this figure starts on page 237, and as you go through, you'll see each department has a header. So information technology, that list is on page 240, the police department is on 241, public works is 243, 244.
Thank you. I think it's important as we move forward, particularly since we had a lot of volume last week on the presentation, but we don't have very much volume today when we're actually talking about numbers, to make sure that people know where to look if they're going to be loud and complain about things.
Fair point. Thank you. And we talk a lot less about capital improvement projects today, just because of the nature of the departments that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But tomorrow, given that we're talking about public works, police, HCD, we get into a lot more detail about the capital improvement structure.
Oh, no, and David, don't misunderstand me, or acting city manager, whichever way you want to be called. I think you're doing a fantastic job. I just think that there are some of these things that if people are talking about communicating that are discoverable, and if we point people to these things, then potentially there will be less acrimony.
Thank you. So again, I just will hop through a lot of the operations info, pretty high level. A lot of the detail is in the proposed budget. The interesting thing about these particular groups is that they are largely personnel. So most of the costs that you'll see are personnel related. So beginning with the legislative department, if you will, that department includes, there we go, page 54, thank you, council member. The legislative department accounts for the salary and fringe benefit costs for the 7 members of the city council and other expenses related to activities of council. The department generates no revenues. The total expenditure is $325,000. The personnel budget is 70%, or about $228,000 of that total budget, and then operating expenses are $96,000. Personnel costs increased from the fiscal year 23 by about 9%, and this is mainly due to the full implementation of the city council salary increase that was approved by the last city council. The largest operations budget item for the legislative department are services and charges. Those account for $43,765. And items, the largest items included in that budget item are the legislative advocate contract, so that's Ann's contract, $5,000 for language interpretation and translation, and then another $5,000 for scholarships to Montgomery College students. There's also a notable $20,000 dedicated to conferences, trainings, and dues. And those conferences include the National League of Cities City Summit, the National League of Cities Congressional Cities Conference, as well as the Maryland Mayors Association Conference.
And does that also
Can I,
include the
how do we ask questions? Do we push buttons?
Councilmember Gibson, if you would like to ask a question, please, I'm asking for everyone to hit your mic, and then you will be queued up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gibson.
Thank you. Acting City Manager Eubanks, one of the strategies that came up under council's new priorities had to do with greater support in terms of the onboarding, as well as continuing support of council members. Now, I guess I just don't know whether that has some budget implications, and if so, would that be in the clerk's, or would it be in the legislative area? And I'm not sure what it would include. I do know that several of us have struggled with IT issues, knowing how to reach our constituents. So I bring up the question, where would any sort of additional support for council members be, in what department would that show up? Would it be here or some other place?
I think it very well makes sense for it to be here.
Okay.
It is not included, mostly because, as you stated, Councilmember, I'm not sure what that would mean. And so it would be helpful, I think, as we go through this process, and particularly during the reconciliation, if council has some clear guidance and a monetary value to be added for such a thing.
Right, well,
it
I
would
don't
be
believe,
appreciated.
I mean, thank you. Yeah, I do think that further discussion would be helpful. We do have it as a part of the council priorities, so it's not coming out of nowhere. And we have had discussions, at least several of us had discussions with the city clerk, which have been helpful. Yes, there will need to be, I think we need to consider a better way to help us do our job, which will then help them do their jobs. So I want to hold that up as an important priority. Whether it has significant budget implications, I'm not sure. It certainly has some procedural implications. One of the ideas that has been considered is to have a handbook, create a handbook for council orientation and support. And that shouldn't cost a lot of money, but it is, I think, an important one. 4 of us are new on this council, and we sort of have learned by just reaching out other places and rather than the city. Thank you.
Again, as Acting Deputy City Manager Eubanks expressed, And I do just want to remind my colleagues, one of the more important things for everyone to do is during these conversations is to keep stock of the items that you, one, have questions about. And so if there are items in the budget that you have more in-depth questions about, so for example, just picking on you for a second, what actually is included in like supplies, for example, or services and charges in the legislative, and that I'm looking at our city clerk, I'm pretty sure that it includes things like Zoom and other things that maybe we could use as council members to engage with our constituents. But if there is something specific that you are interested in adding to the budget, that you keep stock of that. And then when we get ready to enter into reconciliation, that would be an item that would be put on the list.
You gotta
So-
know the number too. You gotta have the, like, if you're gonna do that kind of stuff, you gotta know what it costs.
Yeah. So it needs to be something that, that you can give a rough estimate and describe, and members of the council would need to vote to include.
It would, as per this one suggestion, say the handbook, which has a nominal cost but would take some time, does that show up in the reconciliation process? It as a kind of procedural or?
No, procedural items would be something that we would have to deal with through other mechanisms. So if it is something like council onboarding, and as we talked about previously, forming subgroups around the priorities, right? Because there's a lot there. A council subgroup could form around that particular priority and come up with ideas for how we should onboard new council members. That could result in some form of a resolution that ultimately gets voted on in terms of creating a handbook. I'm just making it up, but that would be something that would happen through
Regular
the
business.
policy making, the regular business that we do. It would fall outside of discussions in the budget.
All right, so it's strictly items with significant budgetary implications, not small ones. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
No worries. Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, I had a couple of questions. The first one is, I'm afraid we'll be here all night if I ask all my detailed questions. So can the acting man at the end of the table here, seriously, can you just restate for us when you want questions, how you want them in writing, what's your process here for written questions rather than, that are like more detailed? And so we know when we're supposed to get you stuff, and I know you said this Wednesday, but could you say it again?
Yeah, sure. We can take questions whenever. The only thing that we ask is that if you have multiple questions, that you kind of package them.
Bundle them.
And I need to speak with my staff to figure out what the time expectation is for turnaround. I know we all need them quickly, but I'm just not having seen the questions. I'm not sure exactly how long it will take, but
Okay.
the goal would be within, I'll say, within the 48 hours to turn around a response.
Okay. So an example of a question that I could probably not ask right this minute is you mentioned the operating expenses include services and charges. No. Conference training dues include some of the National League of Cities, et cetera. Is there another place in the budget where the membership for National League of Cities and the Council of Governments and all that is, or is that all in here?
Most of it is here.
You're shaking your head no.
There is
Okay.
another section within the city manager's budget
Okay, so,
that does also do some, have some association costs.
yeah,
Um,
so those
and-
two together,
Yeah,
right?
that's,
Because
yeah, I think those are the only two
any one membership
places.
is not small.
Right, right,
right.
right.
So
So a
this
lot
is
of
not
those are
just
captured in the city manager's
Travel,
budget too.
right? This is dues, this is the whole business.
Right.
That's what I was getting at.
Right.
Okay. This and the number in the city managers. The other question I had, don't need my answer right now, is just a question of information about the committee stipends. In terms of how they were used in '23, did we get oversubscribed on the $18,000? Did we get undersubscribed by a lot? Was that about the right amount of money? I see you just saying yes.
We'll get that for you.
Okay.
I don't have it all.
All right,
top of my
great.
head.
Yeah, because having made the original $18,000 estimate, I know how I made it, so I'm curious how it's gotten used over the last year. Thank you. That's it for me on this one.
Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to say two things about this. The first thing is that I'd like to note for the record and for anybody who's watching this that David didn't do any of that really bad onboarding. So he should, that should be noted. And number two, I am impressed up to this point, in particular with the way in which this is being presented. And in particular, it seems to be substantively different in certain ways than previous budgets were presented because they were more arcane than this. I would say that if there was a coded thing that could go on the website or something for citizens that had page numbers on where the detail is for each of these things, it may be helpful to the people who are interested in where the money goes, because this budget officially has it in there. And it's just because it's big and stuff like that, it's just a little bit harder to find. But I would like to say that it's ironic to me that we got all those awards for previous budgets, because this one is way cooler. So you're gonna win something probably.
So we can, what we can do is add page numbers to the presentation. And I think that'll help
I think
direct some
that'd be
folks.
fantastic.
Okay.
Councilmember Honzak?
Excuse me. I'm just trying to figure out excuse me, I know you just stated we could talk at you during your presentation, ask you questions, or wait till the end. Can we get, I'm not clear whether there will also be presentations from other staff members, and I want to make sure we get through and then we leave you space to ask. So can you just clarify the process and approximately how long, if we were not to interrupt you, how long you would speak for, and then sort of so we can imagine when we should ask our questions? Thanks.
Yeah, I think the presentation won't take any more than 15, 20 minutes tops.
Okay.
And no, I don't expect any of my colleagues to present. They're here mostly to answer the detailed questions that I can't answer.
Okay.
So I expected that there'd be a Q&A at the end, and that they would be available to answer questions that I can't. But I'm fine proceeding the way that we are. If we want to get through just each section at least and then ask questions, that works for me.
And as a point of order, I just wanted to apologize for maybe starting this off. I was just curious about what the protocol was initially.
It's your fault, Councilmember Small.
If I could
Councilmember
just-
DeBala asked the
could-
same question.
Could I propose, based on my question, that we consider letting him finish and then
Ask
go
him
back for the
questions.
details? I fear that we won't get through and we'll give disadvantage to certain departments.
Sure.
Thanks.
We'll be
Yes.
here all night. I totally agree, and thank you, Councilmember Honzak. So, Mr. Eubanks?
Okay.
If folks can please take notes and hold your questions. One of the beautiful things about a PowerPoint is you can go back. All right, Councilmember Gibson.
Just a follow-up in terms of the process. So in terms of sending you questions ahead of time, I sent some earlier and you responded quickly. I sent it to the whole council. I'm just wondering if we want to encourage that so that we know what each other's questions are, and that we get the collective response.
What we'll try to do is aggregate all of the questions and responses that we get from all council and send them all out at one time.
I appreciated the quick response that I got and that we all got. Instead of getting them all at once, as soon as they're collected, it would help me that I can look at it little by little rather than, trying to drink from a fire hose.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
Yes, let's move
All right.
forward.
Let's see. So moving on to the city manager's office. As you all know, the city manager's office provides oversight for the daily operations of the city, as well as professional recommendations to city council. City manager's office carries out the policies, programs, ordinances, and resolutions approved by council, manages municipal services, departments, and positions, and informs City Council of the city's financial condition and future financial needs. The department generates no revenues. Expenditures total about $873,000. The majority of expenses are personnel costs, which make up about 85% of the total budget. And in operating expenses are about $133,000 of the $872,000 city manager's office budget. FTEs stay the same for FY24 as they were in FY23. Yes. The proposed budget includes a personnel increase of 13% compared to the projected budget. That is a result of the filling of some vacancies. You'll note too, and this is an important note to make, that the projections are to the, the comparisons are to the projected budget, not last year's adopted budget. And the logic behind that is essentially that there's also a projection from the adopted budget to what we expect to happen at the end of the year, there are two comparisons in the budget. There's a comparison of the adopted budget to what we expect to happen at the end of the year, and then there's a projection of what we expect to happen at the end of the year into FY24. And so there's, if you will, a 360 approach, right? So adopted to projected to FY24. And the logic is that gives us the most realistic perspective that one can have, right? It's difficult, I think, in any given year to compare adopted to adopted because in both cases you're making a considerable number of assumptions. And so projected to adopted is kind of where you are, how you expect to get to what you intend to do in FY24. And so that's why the projection or comparison is what it is. And so, as I said, there's a 13% increase from the projected numbers, again, accounting for vacancies. And also mention that FTEs remain the same for the department. The largest operating expense is conference training and dues. Councilmember, this is to your point, that total is about $80,000. And that includes memberships to the Maryland Municipal League, the National League of Cities, and these are memberships to the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, or NWCOG, and the ICMA, the International City Management Association, and that's just to name a few. There are no CIP projects generated by this department. Moving on to the city clerk's department. City clerk is responsible for the preparation of council meeting agendas, minutes, and supports a variety of city council events and activities. As we well know, that department does quite a bit. That's inclusive of managing recruitment and appointments to the council-appointed boards and committees, serving as election administrator for all city elections, managing and protecting the official records of the city, ensuring proper codification of ordinances, and responding to requests made under the Maryland Public Information Act. The department generates no revenues. Expenditures total about $364,000 in FY24. That's a 1% increase from the projected budget. Personnel costs make up 93% of this budget, and the remaining operations are about $26,000. Services and charges are 5% of the department's budget, and include $7,500 for software, $3,500 for legal notice advertising, and another $5,000 for web hosting and updating the city code. FTEs for the department remain unchanged, and there'll also be a specific focus this year from the city clerk's office on reviving the city's record management procedures. there are no CIP projects related to the city clerk's office. The Finance Department assists the city government in meeting its service objective by allocating and tracking the organization's financial resources, processing financial transactions and payroll, and providing information and analysis as a basis of decision-making. There are no revenues generated by the Finance Department. Total expenditure is about $759,000. Personnel is a large percentage of this budget as well, at 79% of the budget, or almost $600,000. And operating expenses are about $160,000. FTEs remain the same for this year for the Finance Department. The services and charges budget item or budget line make up about $140,000 of the operating budget and include expenses for such things as the annual audit, which is budgeted at $36,000 for this year. Financial software, budgeted at $52,000. And about $30,000 for Montgomery County property and stormwater billing. And once again, there are no CIP items for the Finance Department. Moving on to Human Resources. The Human Resources Department is responsible for a wide range of human capital management functions for the employee life cycle, including managing compensation and benefits, employee and labor relations, adhering to legal compliance and ensuring legal compliance, recruitment and retention, risk management, and training. Total revenues are zero. This department does not generate revenue, but they do expense at about $800,000 a year. Their budget is 63% personnel, and that number is incorrect. It should not be 151. It should be about $500,000. I think it's $501,000. So we'll correct that before this is posted. Operating expenses are nearly even at $300,000 and make up about 44% of the department's budget. Operating costs are down by $55,000 for FY24 compared to FY23. And a lot of this is an improvement or an efficiency from the HRIS system that replaces two older systems, both the Success Factors, which is our recruiting system, as well as kind of our payroll system, Kronos. So really excited about the cost savings that we're realizing there, and that's exactly what you hope for your technology to do. A couple of department highlights. As I mentioned, the operating expenditure totals about $300,000, and that's largely made up of $63,000 allocated to software, annual payments, that's the new system, the new HRIS system, Paycor, a reclassification study, budgeted at $100,000. That's a follow-up to the wage study that was done last year. So we're hoping that that study will answer a lot of questions for us about personnel. $70,000 allocated to the hiring of a new city manager. That includes both the search as well as community engagement, and then another $50,000 for general recruiting. That's postings, which all cost, many of them cost, in advertisements for a lot of the vacancies that we hope to fill this year. And again, FTEs remain unchanged. Our Information Technology Department provides leadership and support for all city technical activities. That includes ensuring the network infrastructure and equipment is maintained and serviced using best practices, supporting citywide process automations, paperless operations, and other green computing initiatives, and maintaining the city's disaster recovery plan to current and emerging threats to ensure the uninterrupted operations of the city's technology services. The IT department generates no revenues. Expenditures total about $908,000. Personnel expenses are about 61% of the department. FTEs remain unchanged from FY23. And operating costs are about $359,000, or close to 40% of the department's budgets. There is a increase of about 10% compared to the projected numbers. That is largely to account for some vacancies in IT, some long-standing vacancies. The department's software budget, which is a part of services and charges, totals $232,000, and that software supports all city activities. But you should know that many departments also have their own software line that pertains to the needs and operations of the individual department. So all software is not aggregated within IT. And this budget, or this department rather, does include a capital improvement project, or two of them, for a total of about $28,000. The funding for these capital improvement projects come from two sources: the general fund as well as the equipment replacement reserve, or ERR. In FY24, there's a $25,000 allocation from the general fund for the enhanced data center security and firewall. That project is intended to secure the city's IT infrastructure by providing staff with secure connectivity on-site and external software applications and internet services. Our IT director is here to answer any specific questions about that. But generally, we, like many other local governments and large organizations, are susceptible to IT threats. And so it's important for us to maintain a very firm policy and firm goal of making sure that our systems are operating efficiently enough to deter and reject any threats to the city's software and city operations. And so this allocation is intended, this $25,000 in general fund capital improvement project is intended to ensure that. The second project is relatively small. It's $3,000 worth of investment from the ERR to support the smartboard refresh. The Community Center and Public Works use several smartboards for presentations and collaboration, and there are quite a few that are very old, at least from a TV perspective, and they frequently fail and can no longer be maintained, and so it's time to replace those, and so that $3,200 is purposed for that. The Communications and Media Department is responsible for the using media and technology to inform, educate, entertain, and engage residents while sharing items of public and cultural interest. The department includes two divisions, communications and city TV. They're responsible for operationalizing that goal in quite a few ways. The maintenance of the city's website and social media outlets, the publication of the city's newsletter, seasonal guides, The Insider, and blogs, broadcasting on cable television, the technical and audio services that allow for productions such as the city council meeting, and the production of original radio talk shows highlighting community activities, issues, and organizations. The department does generate revenue from two primary sources: cable franchise fees as well as cable operating grants. Revenues for this department in FY24 expected to be about $490,000. Revenues, however, do continue to decline because those franchise fees are related to users. And as we have less users that are signing up for or using cable and cutting the cord, that fee is expected to decrease and has been decreasing over the last few years. Expenditure totals for the department are about $820,000. Personnel is about 72% of communications and media. FTEs remain the same. And just to point out a few operating highlights, there is a decrease in the operating expense of about 4% compared to the projected FY23. And a lot of that comes from some savings in newsletter production. Operating costs for the division include, the large costs anyway, include $120,000 allocation for the newsletter production, as well as or all website-related expenses, which are about $65,350. And there's also a CIP project associated with comms and media. The total expense for the project is $75,000, and this involves the temporary relocation of City TV from their current location to a new one within the city building to allow for the library and community center redevelopment. So their existing facility will be significantly impacted by the community center renovation. It includes the expansion of that particular section of the community center, and so in order to continue, again, things like our city council meetings and the production and broadcasting of it, they will need to be relocated. And that $75,000 comes from the Special Revenue Fund. Special Revenue Fund. Yes. Okay, and last but not least, and then we can take questions and make city staff available, is recreation. Recreation Department is responsible for providing creative, diversified, and safe programs and services that attract participants of all ages and delivering those services effectively and efficiently. The Recreation Department is divided into several divisions, 8 in total: administration, Tacoma Park Recreation Center, community programs, athletic fields and facilities, camps, before and after school programming, youth outreach, and community center. This department also generates revenues from 2 primary sources. One is the agreement with the county that was developed and started, I believe, as a result of the city's and county's transfer of the recreation center. That is a fixed amount of $85,000. And then there are also fees and charges for recreation services. And that amount for FY24 is about $445,000. Expenditures for the department total $2.1 million. And expenditures here you'll see divided by each division. Personnel costs for the division are 74% of the entire budget at about $1.6 million. FTEs for recreation actually decrease very, very slightly by 0.39, and this is due to the elimination of the recreation specialist, which is a part-time position. The department programs and services for FY24 include about $40,000 allocation to youth success and team programming and special events, about $55,000 to the annual Egg Hunt, Monster Bash, outdoor movies, as well as the Winter Basketball League, Futsal League, and the Yes League, $54,000 to the maintenance of Lee Jordan and Ed Wilhelm Fields, and then finally $34,000 in expenses for the rent of Montgomery County school facilities, that are utilized by the rec department. There are, and I think we've talked about this a little bit as a part of our regular council meetings, there are 3 equipment purchases scheduled for FY24. The first is for the large bus. We've allocated $140,000 for the purchase of the large bus that's used for trips for camps, seniors, and teens. It's also used by other departments. Of note are police and HCD. The current bus was purchased in 2007 and is currently 15 years old. It's also the only vehicle with a wheelchair lift, so it's used pretty frequently by seniors, and that wheelchair lift has been broken for quite some time. And so we're looking to replace the large bus, which was originally scheduled for replacement in 2017, but has been delayed since. The small bus is also scheduled to be purchased in FY24. The allocation for that is $120,000. This is the only bus that can be used without a CDL license, so it's used more frequently than the large bus, and it was originally scheduled to be replaced in 2018. Finally, for a cost of about $7,000, the Recreation Department is looking to replace a treadmill in the New Hampshire Avenue Recreation Center. The current model is about 5 years old and will be replaced with a more modern and efficient unit. And that is the end of today's CIP and operating budget presentation. Again, we will continue the conversation with the remaining city departments on April 19th, which is the same day as our public hearing, and then we'll follow up next week with the ARPA budget discussion. So I'll pause here, and city staff is available for questions that council might have. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I just, I was following you through with the book and your presentation. I appreciate, and I hate to say it, but I agree with Councilmember Small that I see this as a step up from where we've been in the past. I really appreciate that. But it seemed like you skipped over the legal department.
Yes, I'm sorry, I did. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but generally speaking, the legal department is composed of the city's external providers of legal services. So the 2 big categories are labor relations and the city attorney. The city attorney oversees the majority of the legal work generated by the city, and the labor relations attorney focuses pretty largely, especially recently, on the union engagement. So right now, our labor attorney is focusing primarily on the negotiation of the collective bargaining agreement. I believe the allocation for FY24 is just over $500,000, which is pretty consistent with past years. So we're not seeing a large increase in the budgeted amount, despite the fact that the city attorney's office has increased their fees for FY24. But if you look at the activity for past years, it's been below budgeted. And so the belief is that even with the cost increases, the city's budget can manage pretty well the cost increase. Thank you, C. Excuse me, so I misspoke a little bit. It's not $500,000 that's allocated for FY24. It's about $470,000.
It's okay to make mistakes in that direction, right?
And just a few things to highlight. I'll just mention that the overall budget, as I said, didn't increase by much, just 2% increase from the last fiscal year.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was why I wanted to ask the question, is that seemed like a small percentage of increase. I knew we had raised the fee, and so we're not anticipating any significant increase in the amount of work to do?
No, I think, at least from my perspective, I think that the month-to-month volume of work that the city attorneys produce is fairly consistent. So I don't think we'll see an increase in the amount of labor. As we know, there'll be an increase in cost, but we think that's within the budgeted amount.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Nobody else?
Wow, that's amazing.
Oh,
Thank you so much. I actually want to make sure that I'm not going to have us go too long, and we'll definitely send my questions forward separately. And I thank Councilmember Siemens for bringing up the legal services. There was one question that I wanted to make sure that I understood. Finance is fine. City manager search. So the $70,000, was that based on the prior city manager search contract, or is that something we need to verify?
No, it was based on the prior city manager's contract plus a pretty significant escalation. I don't recall exactly how much money we added to that.
I looked it up once.
But it is, I want to say the previous contract was maybe $50,000, and so I think we've added another 20,000 just to account for more community engagement.
And you put
Okay.
it all in fiscal '24.
It's all in FY24.
Okay, okay. And then, last question, so we're anticipating the reclassification study happening in '24, but if there were any recommendations that the council would need to determine in terms of any kind of salary adjustments as a result of the reclassification, that would likely happen in '25.
I think that's probably most realistic.
Okay,
My understanding is that those reclassification studies typically take a long time too, number of months. So I'm not sure that we'll have, anything in the interim. Also, we'll have to issue an RFP, find a vendor, so all that'll take some time.
okay. And I think, I can't find it right now. I will send my questions in the laundry list alongside my colleagues. I think there was one other, yes, I flagged it. On the legislative table, special events and programs was, it's page 54.
Thank you.
And so we projected, in FY '23, it was 71,000, and we're proposing for FY '24. Does anyone recall what in the world was council spending like $80,000 on?
The election.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I looked that up. What in the world?
What in the world?
For the
That's
record,
a lot of money.
because Jesse's mic was off, the answer was the election.
The election, okay, perfect. Thank you for that. That's all I got. Councilmember DeBala?
Yes, I have a bunch of fairly small questions about IT and HR and all of that stuff. But since we have two distinguished recreation folks with us, let's talk about recreation. The first question I have is I know we took a dip, big dip, in revenues, in fees, and it started to come back up. And I note that if I'm reading this right, we've exceeded our projection, our original estimate for fees for this year by a fair amount. So what's the thinking in terms of a relatively conservative estimate for '24 in terms of fees? I'm sure you have a reason here.
Yes, we do, unfortunately, but it's actually a great thing. Library construction. With library construction, a lot of space in this building will be taken, which will reduce the size of our before and after care programs, our summer camps, and some of our classes. We're attempting to get space in schools
And that costs
to have
money.
some of that, but, and we've actually anticipated those additional costs too.
Yeah, I
I
saw
believe I
that.
put $7,000 additional in for Montgomery County Public School facility rentals in this budget. So we just have to get the space, and hopefully we can continue on the same level. However, some of the programs, like our aftercare program, we won't be able to increase the space to actually have that in the schools because of the other aftercare programs that are in
Yeah.
the schools.
So we
And
only have
And
some,
for summer,
which summer? The
Yeah,
one that we're just about going into.
well, it starts with this summer,
Yeah.
this coming summer. We have 2 weeks of summer in this particular fiscal year, and then the other 7 weeks, I believe, in next fiscal year.
Okay.
So we don't have as much space in the schools as we like because the schools use that time to be worked on,
Yeah.
get a lot of maintenance done, so.
Okay. Well, that's too bad, but it's, as you say, it's a good reason and it's temporary.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you're thinking that that's a pretty realistic estimate then of,
Yes, we're
Yeah.
thinking it's pretty realistic. Hopefully, we can exceed it.
but let's
You know, if we
not
can find ways to exceed it.
count on it,
But,
yeah.
I mean, that's the goal.
Yeah. Next question, Tacoma Langley agreement. I don't remember, pardon?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, they pay us.
Yes, they pay us, but they've paid us the same amount since the thing was signed. And I just don't remember, was it a flat fee for a certain number of years with no escalation in it? And with the recreation center redevelopment starting to move, it may not be worth going back, but have you thought about that, going back and saying, look, it's been 10 years or whatever it's been, and you're still paying us the same thing you were then?
Right. I believe that was something that was actually done out of the city manager's office.
I think you're right.
Yes, it was done actually out of the city manager's office. I believe it also tied into the tax duplication somehow.
Oh, I thought
I'm
it was
not-
separate.
Yeah, I'm
All
not
right, so-
actually
so
sure
I'm not
how,
sure either.
but I believe something was connected
Okay.
with that. And the actual costs were fixed that we received. We actually were initially receiving a much higher amount, and then
Yes.
the county reduced it.
Yes.
I want to say about 5 years ago. If
Yeah, I
I'm remembering
forgot
correctly,
about
it was
that.
about 5 or 6 years ago. They actually reduced the amount because they were having issues with the county's budget. So they reduced our budget for
So,
that facility.
okay, so that's not, maybe not a recreation department question, maybe that's an alternative revenues question for the city manager's office, is whether that is something that is worth it to pursue at this point. I'm not sure, because I don't remember enough about the details. But it jumped right out at me, oh, I know this number. Let's see, so I was gonna ask you about before and after care and the potential for expansion, but you've already answered that. And about numbers of participation, is it possible to get a little more detail for inquiring residents about the bounce back in participation post-COVID? Not necessarily the fees, but the numbers of people participating in different programs. I know you keep that stuff.
Yeah.
Would it be a lot of work to put it together? No.
We can pull something like that together through ActiveNet. It might take us a couple of days.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
In
not
order to-
directly related to the
Yeah,
budget,
and,
but I've been getting the question
okay.
in a positive way, like people are happy to see the
Okay.
bounce back.
Yeah, we can get that to you sometime next week if that's possible.
Yeah, that's great, that's
okay.
great. And last but not least, I'm afraid I need to bring up the buses. So,
Perfect.
so I looked back and I see that all along, the small bus was scheduled in the capital budget for this year.
Yes.
And last week, we asked to see, for the police vehicles, to just see the data, and Director Braithwaite sent it to us in a table. What is the anticipated points for these to, are they in the capital budget because that you anticipate they'll make the number of points to be replaced? Or have you already done that analysis for 24 and that's why they're in the budget?
Yeah,
Maybe that's a,
well, both buses have been pushed back. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, both buses have been pushed back.
oh, did we push back the small one too?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, they've been pushed back a few years. They were supposed to be, one of the buses
Oh,
was supposed to be replaced pre-pandemic. I wanna say
Right.
Both
I
of
remember
them,
this
more than
now.
likely. We were put on pause to go and take a look at EV and hybrid options.
Yes.
I believe at that time, it was pre-pandemic, I believe the bus hybrid option came back at, I want to say around 70,000, if I can remember correctly. And then it, of course, it got pushed back again, and now there is no hybrid option available any longer. And the EV option doesn't give you the distance that we would need to travel and feel comfortable.
For the smaller bus?
Well, that's
For both
for,
buses?
yes, that's for both buses.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because the point of the buses is to go a
Correct,
distance. Yeah.
correct. Yeah, that's for both buses.
Okay,
So the only option available now is gas.
right, okay. And, you may have just answered the question, but I'd like to, if possible, see the detail on the two buses. Because we pushed them off because they didn't get a lot of use, a lot of mileage, whatever, during the pandemic, but we are now
Right.
pandemic in many ways, and have we started using it again in the last few months? And then I
Well,
had one more bus question,
yes.
and I'll stop.
Yes, we've started having trips. Again,
Yes.
we held off on trips.
Yeah, but we have
which-
started now, so the
Yes,
buses
we
are
have
back
started.
rolling, so to
Yep,
speak.
we have
Yeah.
started trips. Our seniors are gonna start back with their summer camp as well. So our aftercare, well, they really don't use the bus, but our summer camp and our teens use the bus a lot. In addition, other departments use the buses as well. And we really need the bus with the wheelchair lift for all of our senior activities. Pre-pandemic, they went on a trip, I want to say,
Yeah, I
it was about
remember this.
once a month.
Yeah,
And it was a pretty, yes, and yeah.
Physically
We need to make sure
lifting,
that all
yeah.
participants have access to be able to go.
and I think we talked about this once before, remind me, there is not a cost-effective way to just retrofit the lift, correct?
No,
Yeah,
no, there
That's
isn't.
what I thought.
No.
Okay. So yes, the vehicle data and any use data, because now we're starting to use it again.
Okay.
After not for, that'd be very helpful.
Okay.
And I know this is just putting it in the budget so that we can make a decision at the time, right? This is not the approval of a bus. This is just putting it in the budget so that we have the option to buy it in the next year.
And I
just
do want to
wanted
say.
explain that.
I do want to add, speaking with Director Braithwaite, they have to actually build the buses, so it's not like
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
there's a
go.
delay.
Yeah, so it's going to take quite some time for them to actually build once we decide to buy.
And how many seats is the small bus? So it's bigger than a standard van? 15.
We're planning to get two 15-passenger buses. One is 15.
Okay, you can
We
let
can
us
get you
know.
that information. We can
Yeah.
get you that information.
they're not-
One
they're-
will have a lift and one won't.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, one last thing. Thank you for everything you all have done to get us. The recreation part of getting through the pandemic was huge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gibson?
Good, if you don't mind, just stay up there. I wanted to follow up on the bus. Yeah, I guess we did have a series of questions with regard to the process of choosing to replace vehicles, and there actually was a commenter from the public that talked about the small bus and how he was glad that it wasn't replaced because it continued to serve very well. It turns out that I've seen pictures of it again, and he says it looks in very good condition. Obviously, looks are not the issue here. I don't think that actual miles, there's arbitrariness about miles. So I don't know if there's any kind of way to talk about, just what the usable life is of a vehicle, and whether that's in the information that you can provide to us that's helpful. Again, if it was in an accident, if it's not usable, that makes a lot of sense. If you need to retrofit it and you can't retrofit it, that makes sense. So I just look as much detail as you can about these significant capital budgets.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's something that we can get to Director Braithwaite.
Thank you. Yeah, it actually applies to all the vehicles. The number of miles is not, in my mind, an adequate determination for rather significant purchases. I wanted to ask I guess it's the Communications Division, if I might. Sorry, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And it might be communication or IT, but it has to do with our website. Is that? So, there's a lot of interest in trying to put together something that could be, and just stuff happens. Where are we? Either for this year or next year?
No, I think we're definitely within the next couple of weeks. I've worked with my communication specialist lab, so in the department, and we just hired an editor, so that's going to give them relief for the news, but it's going to take a couple of that's not planning. I have a we're very close to the weeks because we need to make sure that all of the motion happen the way we think they did. We're still working through what needs to be archived. We're going to move the actual website once we go live. We're going to move it to another site so we have access to it. And right now we're just updating content.
Mm-hmm.
And with just myself and all other communication social media blog site updates that are still continuing. So I'm going as fast as I can.
I certainly on you. It does. I mean, if we're talking about a couple of weeks here, it's going to be past the time for it comes. I mean, if the website interface
Things to go through a process with it. When you do a website migration like this, a team of people, usually 3 people that do a normal job.
Oh,
Website.
just said, there was a great interface that I thought would be up. You can get in time for people to use. We've got May deadline before the budget is
You're conflating different issues.
I'm trying to get clarified.
Yeah, so there's a couple of activities that are underway. There's one that is designed to revamp our website, and that is what our Director of Communications is expressing. There was a separate project, and I can definitely defer to Acting Deputy City Manager Eubanks, the Balancing Act platform, which was
Interactive.
it was more interactive around the budget, but it was never intended necessarily to be something that could, in a real-time way, inform this budget session. It's something that, a tool that once implemented could provide us with a way to have communicate or to engage the community around priority settings with the budget. But I'll defer to Acting Deputy City Manager Eubanks or Director Chung around the timing of the Balancing Act platform, which is different from the upgrades and modernization of our website.
Mayor, I have a point of order here as well.
And I do want to say.
Councilmember Small, if you could hold on one second until this point is clarified.
I do want to say that the website was paid for this funds from the 2023 budget, so it's already paid for.
Great.
According to the contract. So there's no additional funding now. We'll keep adding as new resources and tools as we go.
Excellent.
But for this, as far as the actual basic website, it's already paid.
I just understand there are fees that go along with just
Correct.
hosting a website.
Yes.
So
Contract
you're going
maintenance,
to see
yes.
line items in the budget regarding a website, web hosting and the like,
Correct.
but it is basically so that we can ensure that our website is functioning properly.
works.
Right.
Yes, correct.
And thank you for
and what-
clarify
Yeah,
if
sure.
the city manager, yeah.
I don't
yes,
have anything
I
more
was
to add.
asking, that's why I wasn't sure whether it was IT or whether it was
I'm sorry.
communications, because
That's a tool, is what we would call a tool that links to the website, but it's not connected. It's connected as a way, a vehicle of it being able to preview the tool, but it's actually not, it's separate from the website.
and it's not going to happen this year.
Balancing Act, we hope to pick that back up, I'll say, May, June. But that is also paid for. It's just a matter of staff capacity. So it started, I think, under the last city manager, just, before the transition, the budget assumed all interest and attention.
Right.
And so I think the other thing was that the usefulness of it, I think the goal was originally to try to have it be a tool that, as the mayor's mentioned, be a tool for informing the public, not necessarily informing them of allowing feedback from the public to us about the FY24 budget, but certainly the nuances of what it means to develop a budget. And so the usefulness of it, given the timeline, and when we felt that we would actually be able to implement Balancing Act, the two didn't match. And so Balancing Act has some other components to it. And so we think some of those other components will be more useful later on in the year. And then we'll do again a revamp of the tool that you're talking about, which is meant to inform the public of the process closer to the FY25 budget, so at the beginning of next year. And again, it'll be an educational tool more than anything else.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad for the clarification. I didn't think it was going to happen this year, and that it would be. So what we have is an updated website,
Yeah.
which will reference the budget, and hopefully, and I haven't seen how it might help residents feel like they are learning more. I like the suggestion in terms of, presentations with page numbers. Whatever we can do, make it more transparent and more clear why we're making a given decision or what the decisions are. And the sooner that we do that, the better. I mean, we're all hearing from our constituents. They want to know what's going on. And in the past, there's been a sense that it wasn't clear enough. And whatever we can do, I appreciate. And if next year this tool can be used to inform residents about not only the process, priorities prior to the budget, that would be great. But it was a question that,
This was not a
request
question.
that didn't have.
It's a pontification that's out of order.
I beg your pardon?
It's out of order.
I
We're
think-
talking about the budget, and you're actually making statements about policy considerations that aren't in order.
I beg your pardon. I'm speaking, and you have interrupted me.
No, I'm making a point of order about the fact that you are taking up time saying things that other people already said about making sure that you provide detailed information about the line items and where they go. So for you to continue to say it is just you taking up time.
Councilmember Small, Councilmember Gibson was asking a question regarding items that were contained within the budget and asking for
And my
clarification.
point of order stands.
Well, thank you, Mr. Eubanks, for your time. Thank you very much for your continued work on making it clear how the budget works.
Sure. Thank you.
Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I have some recreation questions to begin with,
okay,
actually,
great.
if that's okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
go.
actually just going to stick with one department at a time. I don't know if that's how we're doing this.
I would love
Is
to
that-
do that, and I'd just like to say while you're up there that I appreciate the fact that you guys are delivering the website exactly when you said you were going to. So thank you for being dedicated employees, even though you lost an employee. That is really impressive.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is that all right, or did you want to try to continue with communication?
Nope,
Yeah.
let's continue to move forward with your line of questions with recreation.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Hi, how you doing? I wanted to ask a little bit more. I appreciated there was some overlap with Councilman Lordbala's questions. I do want to just highlight and help. I guess I'm asking for clarification from anybody here, the manager or the mayor, or Councilmember Dabala, or you. What would be most useful from council here? Because of retrieving the fees from the county that is a fixed cost, as we were talking about, in relation to the rec center. And I think I noted this at a previous council meeting, that the county rec centers are now free. And that particular issue, to my knowledge, hasn't been dealt with. So seems like there's definitely more money to be garnered by our city related to the rec department, and it should not be a fixed fee at this moment in time. But I will table that. Please, or if you want to comment on how we.
Sure. So that's a matter that would require lobbying on our part. It's important
Okay.
to keep in mind that with tax duplication, there was lots of lobbying efforts that went forward with other municipalities in the county to make sure that we were getting somewhat closer to our fair share for the services that we deliver within our municipalities that are duplicative of county services. In terms of recreation level resources, I will say that when the county exec came before the Maryland Municipal League, Montgomery County chapter, that explicit question was asked about whether or not the county could provide additional resources to help municipalities that are dealing with things that we talk about all the time, which is youth needing more outlets and the need for increased recreational services. I will say that he did not seem very open to providing county resources, instead suggested that we lobby the state. So,
Well, he lives in my ward too. So, I think it's such a direct loss of revenue to our city. I find it offensive that would not be considered. It's absurd. That's like a direct dollar for dollar. We're paying taxes. But anyway,
Yeah.
but I'm happy to take that up. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want to lose time on that. Okay, so, and I wanted to specifically ask you things that are related to Ward 5. One of them I know we've already chatted about informally prior to the budget process. But my first one is you talked about space constraints, and I'm trying to imagine how that might get bridged and what we can do and whether there could be some cost savings there. Has the hospital space been explored by your department? Again, I know this is slightly out of the purview of dollars and cents, but it does impact the budget. Has that been explored?
No, to answer your question, no, we haven't explored the hospital space as of yet. We are, as a staff, we've been talking about doing things online like we did during the pandemic, and charging for some of the classes. We've discussed using outdoors during good weather to actually have some of the classes that we have, but the majority of the recreation department's revenue is before and after care and summer camps. And with the reduction in space, finding space to actually have those is the actual challenge. And of course, once you find the space, and then you have to staff them.
No, and
Yeah.
probably maybe I should be looking more at the at the mayor or the city manager. Is that something we've considered? Is it something any department has reached out to about? I don't know if you are aware, but you might be, that it is my understanding that the hospital is now vacated as of April 1.
Yes.
And I don't know that there's any further purpose, and I would imagine that that would be a kind of a low-hanging fruit for us to be able to use an empty space that isn't being used.
I think,
But
I
I'm
think it's
sure it
something.
requires negotiation.
Yeah, I think it's something worth exploring. I don't believe that we have in the past. So I think it's a very interesting question, and we'll do some due diligence on it.
Okay, yeah, and I'm happy to, work with you towards that relationship building as needed. Anyway, I'll follow up on that. Thank you. That kind of leads me to another thing that's relevant to our ward. So I have been speaking to Jackie Frazier from Lunch and Learn, as you're aware, and I'm trying to learn quickly what's been done in the past and how the summer camps that they have run have been operated. They are facing, to her knowledge, space constraints, and I, in fact, said to her, I guess we haven't heard yet about summer camps. Even the schools seem to have late coming information right now about what they're going to have running, I guess also probably because of ARPA funding. So it's not clear whether they have space at all. So 2 questions on that. One is, what's your thought on space constraints that might face a local community group that also runs summer camps, such as a Lunch and Learn or others?
Space in Tacoma Park has traditionally been sort of tight, and for groups like that, I would explore. And I know one year they used Tacoma, the high school.
John Nevins School.
Um,
John Nevins.
Did
no,
they?
not yet. Well, yeah, one summer they used John Nevins Andrews, and then they used Tacoma Academy 1 year as well. Tacoma Academy would work really well. I don't think they have summer programs there. They have a large gym. They have a field for kids to actually play. So I think that would be an option for them. There aren't too many. Maybe Don Bosco, the school over there, because they have a play area as well. One of the most important things that I believe that kids do during the summer is they have some place to run and jump and let off steam, because they've been in the classroom all year, for 6 hours a day. So if whatever location that they can go to, some sort of outlet that kids can get to really quickly if they can walk to it or get to it. Maybe even the hospital site. I'm not sure how much open
I
space
proposed,
is there.
well, I actually
Yeah.
proposed that. I'm just I'm extremely concerned about recreation being limited in this very first major year in which all youth need to be recuperating their
Right.
and seniors and all people need to be recuperating. And I'm very concerned that this is where the resources, this is where the action is at, as far as I'm concerned. And if we're having to cut back in any way, that's of great concern to me, and I want to help us be creative. But so I'm then wondering, I could not find in the budget line items, and if you could help direct me, is I think it was a community grant that was given to a Lunch and Learn or similar types of groups. Could you direct me to that line item where I would see that in the budget?
I believe
It
that
is
would
in
be
your
in the
department.
HCD budget.
This
Well-
is for what program?
Community Partnership Program.
I think that's in the intergovernmental department. Is that right, Susan? Yeah. So
I
it's-
I didn't find it, so if you could
Yeah.
help me.
Give me
If
1
Sue could
second.
help me, yeah. I was specifically looking for that since it's so relevant to
It's
Essex
probably
House.
deep into the back of the
So,
the
yeah.
document.
Under HCD, are you saying?
227.
To other funds, that's stormwater management, 227. We can let you know exactly where it is.
I
Councilman.
mostly want to make sure that I see it here.
It is in the budget.
Um,
I just don't know where off the top of my head.
do you know if it's, I see something called grants under intergovernmental special events and programs grants. Does that sound
Yes.
like it's probably,
What's the amount?
projected, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Projected FY '23 is 55K.
Yeah, that's it.
From actual 222.
Yep, that's it.
Can I
That sounds
ask
right.
why there's such a large reduction then? Is that
From
from actual 22,
22 is, you said it was 200K?
200 to 55? Yeah.
That is, I don't know
And if you're not
offhand.
sure, it's okay.
Yeah.
That's just really important to me. And
It looks like Director Chung may have the answer.
Okay.
If I may, the line right after it
I believe
is partnerships, and that also drops.
the grant
significantly.
amount for fiscal year '22 include a lot of the programs that we are now moved to the ARPA program. So that's why the grant amount here in fiscal year '24 has been significantly reduced.
I think, Director Chung, isn't it also the case that we moved some of the monies in the interdepartmental section that were HCD-related grants to the HCD budget?
Yes, some of the HCD grants and the partnership grant program was moved to the HCD, and some of them were moved to the ARPA program.
So when you look at the HCD budget, there's some places where you'll see a drastic increase in cost, and it's a wash from one section to another, but it's just a transfer of those dollars. And
Yeah.
that's just to, they are HCD programs. We have other HCD grants within the HCD operating budget. So it's just a logistical and logical adjustment more than anything else.
We can actually list the detail of the grant in fiscal year '22 and then show where it was moved to in fiscal year '24.
Thank you. I think that would be really, really helpful.
Okay.
Also, it'd be interesting and useful to be able to see where we've moved things to ARPA that we might have to incur again once we
Yeah.
don't have ARPA funding.
Exactly.
That would be really helpful. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you. Sorry, let me just see if I had some other ones on recreation. That was my most significant set of questions. I guess the other thing I was interested in, and maybe that would go along with it, but is how many of those participants that we're seeing coming in FY this coming summer, are going to be covered by ARPA paid scholarships, and therefore that displacement of funding is coming, shall we say, displaced for this year. I mean, it'd be interesting, helpful to see for the future if we are gaining revenue from participation because of ARPA funding that we wouldn't otherwise have, and then thinking about what that means about bounce back and looking 2 years into the future. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so if I don't know if that's hard to gather, but I would be interested in seeing that in terms of looking at the pattern of revenue.
Okay, well, right
Yeah, thank
now, for FY '20, for this current fiscal year, we've spent, we've given out approximately $150,000 in scholarships. And that's anywhere from 20% to 100% scholarships to residents to participate in programs. So we anticipate to give out around that much again next fiscal year. And those dollars were provided to us by ARPA.
Does that represent a significant increase in your
Yes.
total number of
Yes.
people who are able to participate than you had prior to the pandemic? And you may
don't-
not know the answer to that question. That's
Yeah.
what I'm kind of getting
I don't-
at here.
Yeah,
though.
I don't think it was,
Okay.
it was due to the total number of people that were able to participate, because we had more people participating prior to the pandemic than we do now.
Okay.
But I believe it provides economic relief so that some folks are
Yeah.
able to still
Absolutely.
participate in services.
Okay.
But, just
Thank you.
prior to the pandemic, we only gave 20, 30, 20, 50, and 70% scholarships. When the pandemic started, we started offering 100% scholarships. And we can probably provide a breakdown of how many folks that we have per scholarship, so that you can actually see the numbers of residents. And it's only for residents. that we have. So we'll make sure that we provide that to you guys.
Thank you so much. Sorry for all the questions. Thanks.
Councilmember Small.
I apologize for being in a different place on the mic, and if the camera has to move, it's one of the mechanical aspects of rapid pressure changes. But I do have a couple of concerns about the manner of questioning that we are doing in this particular presentation. And as we go forward, I'd like to just register another point of order about that, because it's not of real value to discuss long-term policy implications when you were looking at the hard numbers unless you were doing the hard cuts. In particular, the places where so far we have talked about revenue gaps, I think it's important to remember that if you get $100,000 total out of the things that you were saying, then you got $100,000 total out of the things you're saying. And we got a $7 million gap. And so it's not really of value to imply to dedicated staff who have just gone back to their job that you are going to nickel and dime their budgets. Like, the people that are in here are fantastic at their jobs. Every single person that's in here. And we are talking about minimal amounts of money. If you look at that big chunk, David, can you put the pie chart back up?
BN, can you pull me back up?
I apologize for holding my time and not saying anything, but thank you. I appreciate that, both of you. It is not of value to anyone's time or dedication to look at this after not knowing what the pages were where this stuff was. In addition, it is not worth reiterating to people that you need to know what the budgetary framework or the whatever is over and over and over again, because they know. I sent in an email, people send in email, stuff like that. Do not perform for people when people are here after work. They work an 8-hour day. I hate to be rude about it, but I've sent emails about it. I asked for a meeting about it. I've tried to note things. And by and large, people continue to be upset and attack me for trying to be decent to people who are actually doing their work. And so, again, please try to be considerate of both your fellow council members and the staff people who come here, because at least this particular presentation is made up of people who have expressed and shown their dedication to actual people in the pragmatic application of being a council person. It's rude to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
I actually have some policy questions also. Greg, can you come back up for a second? I apologize. Oh, you actually could both come up because you do programming as well. If we're going to have a random broad-based thing, when you start talking about economic stressors and the realities associated with that, a lot of times you see that borne out in the kids that are doing these programs and increases and decreases. Do you anticipate that you will need additional funding due to the fact that there are stressors that are on people's lives? And or does this budget include what you think would actually apply to the people involved? Because I need to know so I can juxtapose that against trees.
I think that some of our residents, of course, have not recovered from the effects of the pandemic, and I think we'll continue to see that for a few years. And any assistance that can be given to residents to participate to make sure that they participate. We believe that participation in recreation services for all families is critical, especially kids that can't really afford some of the more expensive services that may be in and around the city. So a continuation of the scholarship program and the 100%, I believe, is critical to making sure that we keep kids safe, busy, away from the screens that they're in front of if they're not with us. Since I want to say since the pandemic, actually since Haven came on, shout out to Haven. Since she came on, our teen program is exploding.
She's fantastic. I've spoken to her a
Yes.
lot.
Yeah.
She actually knew who my son was, so I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. So our teen program is exploding. And these are new kids that are coming to participate in our programs and services. And traditionally in recreation, teens are one of the most hardest groups to get to come and participate. So the fact that she's getting new kids and more kids, I think we should do everything we can to actually keep them and keep them engaged.
And then I would just like to say, Greg, I'd like to be really explicit about something I kind of mentioned in passing before. For someone who had to work in adverse circumstances for a long period of time, that has a baby that they love, which is recreation, and to have to provide your baby to someone else to watch while you were at a distance, but to see the two of you smile together under your commitment to the baby is appreciated. And I personally cannot wait for you to be able to get your sea legs back after having not been in your staff position for a long period of time, so that you can implement some vision with regard to your department. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala?
Thank you. I was thinking about asking this earlier, but I didn't. I figured that nobody's got new programs. So I wasn't going to ask about whether there were additional things, but it was actually on my mind as well. And so if there is some thing that would some additional thing that could be proposed that would address this particular set of residents, youth who are still struggling with the pandemic. If you have something like that already worked up, I would appreciate seeing it. That absolutely does not mean that we would be able to afford it, but I would sure like to know what you're thinking.
Okay.
So.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. Okay. Councilmember Gibson?
I'd just like to say that part of my purpose here is represent a variety of interests, and it has to do with trying to find savings. And part of the reason we look for savings is its impact on property owners and renters. But we also can, as we make savings and we have efficiencies, then we open the door for new programs. So I think we have to do both, or at least we have to. How can we not put too much of a burden on households, and we have low and moderate income, and open up the door to really valuable new programs? So it's let's see if we can do both.
One of the things that I brought to staff's attention during our last, I want to say my first meeting back, was we're going to have a think tank of programs and basically find savings in programs that we've been doing a while that we can do without. And recycle and push those funds to other programs that we want to do, that the community wants, and that the most members of the community can take advantage of. So that's something that we're going to be doing over the next month or two, trying to go in and find out where those low-hanging fruit is, so that we can move money around and offer what the community really wants and really needs.
I thank you. That's exactly what I would like to hear. Really. Thank you.
All right. So I just want to echo my appreciation for all of you all tonight, for coming out and all of your diligent work in presenting the budget and answering our questions. I do want to remind my colleagues that there are ways for you to get feedback from staff. Submitting your questions is definitely one way. I want to encourage you to try your best to consolidate the questions that you have and send them to Mr. Eubanks. Also, it's important to keep in mind that at the end of the day, we have to either thumbs up or thumbs down line items. So the best thing that you can do right now is go through the budget with a fine-tooth comb and really try to identify specific items that maybe you have a question about, or question the numbers, or if there's specific items that you don't see that you would like to make sure that are added, that you ask the necessary questions so that we can start preparing for budget reconciliation. Councilmember Gibson.
I wonder, I mean, this new to this, but I don't know the budget. I don't know the programs that well, and you do. So as Greg was saying, that he knows where there might be savings, where there might be efficiencies. I expect that every single department has that. So what I want to propose, I haven't figured out the specific numbers yet, is some across-the-board reductions in all major departments, and to do and ask you to do what you do best, and you know your programs, with the opportunity perhaps to add those programs that haven't been thought of before. But this is, it's frankly, it's just, I can't do a very credible job of line item identification for what needs to be cut 5 months on the job. I have to look to you. So I will come back and may not be voted successfully, but I will come back and ask that there be a reduction to bring down the tax rate, a reduction in services, programs, or level of service, and then we can see which ones can stick with the council. It's something I'd like to try.
So,
Mayor, can I
sure, go ahead.
respond? So I think there are a couple of things to keep in mind, just for council in general. The first is that a lot of that discussion is a part of our budgeting process. So I think if you recall from several meetings ago, we talked about, it wasn't the intention of the conversation, but we talked about the staff's internal process of finding cost savings, and the realization of a $2 million reduction from what staff had proposed as what they thought was a budget that would allow us to optimally perform the services and duties that we're asked to perform. So from that budget, we reduced, from the budget that was submitted by staff, we reduced that budget already by $2 million. With the understanding that it is a hard pill to swallow to increase the tax rate. But I think to the point of the tax rate, the savings, there are almost two pieces to the discussion, right? There's the general fund and what it means to balance the budget, but there's also this discussion of reserves. And those two things are equal parts of the analysis that council has to do. So you absolutely could reduce the budget by that $870,000 or that $1.5 million to get to either the constant yield or the existing tax rate. However, if you don't, depending on where those cost savings come from, the issue of us not funding the reserves appropriately and or the issue that I raised before of decreasing the fund balance doesn't change. So you can reduce the budget, balance the budget, reduce that $870,000 or that 1.5 and still have the same fund balance issue. The issue that I've tried to state on more than one occasion is that we are reducing the fund balance, which in some cases is appropriate, but aren't appropriately allocating the money from a long-term perspective to ensure that the things that we need to purchase and the things that we need to do 5, 10 years from now we're able to do. So we have to also consider what it means to adequately replace the reserves. And $500,000, which is about what we do, at least in the past couple years, is not enough. And so it's not enough, I think, if the goal of this budget is to make the necessary steps to change and alter the trajectory of the city's fiscal health. It's not enough to just consider the tax rate and balance it. We also have to answer the question, how do we increase the amount of money that we're dedicating to reserves? So it's very important to consider that if we're looking long-term, which from the city staff perspective, we absolutely need to do. Now, that number, just to keep in mind, the number that we got from the financial forecaster of the amount of money, at least for the equipment replacement reserve, that we need to be adding annually is $1.1 million. So we are $500,000 off from the mark that we need to be hitting in order to meet the obligations of the ERR long-term. That's a lot of money. And it's not all going to come now, but again, the goal here is to start heading in that direction.
Thank you. If I might respond. Yeah, I was focusing on the general fund, and your point about the reserves is well taken. I have learned that, we wanted to do a 17% or a 2-month unassigned reserve, and the council's policy is that a resolution was made that if we're headed in that direction, if the trend is up towards that we would do that. We're not going to hit that 17%, that $3 million the first year, but that we're moving toward it. So I think that looking long-term is the trend is right on. One thing that hasn't come out very, very clearly is the trade-offs. And this budget that you have proposed is a maintenance of effort budget. In other words, doing all that we're doing now, all of it. I'm saying that I have constituents, and I feel myself that there are things that we could do less of, have a lower level of service, and maybe some services that we could do without. We might want to take on some new needs, but our trajectory has not simply been based on having a flat tax rate. Our trajectory has been based on increasing expenses, increasing costs, increasing FTEs through the years. And so I think we have to, if we look long-term trend, we need to look at our long-term trend in expenses.
So Councilmember Gibson, that is a question regarding what services your constituents would want to cut that you would need to propose as part of reconciliation, and the council would need to vote. So it's the time for staff to have done their due diligence based on their experience with what residents email them about, call them about, ask them and complain about, 50,000 speed bumps and all of that good stuff. They've put forward what their best guesstimate of maintaining the level of effort that our constituents expect of them in this budget. And so if you're saying that your constituents are willing to accept less, then clearly communicating what that less is so that it can be calculated and added to the list for reconciliation for council vote would be something that I would encourage you to do.
And my response is that I don't know these programs, these services that well. I have asked, and I say my constituents. My constituents are all over the map. Some people are perfectly happy paying more. Others aren't so happy about it, and I'm hearing from them. These folks out here and the staff know where cuts can be made without hurting staff people or or programs seriously. That's why I said that I would like to propose across the board, but cut. I looked at the constant yield plus CPI would require us, if we use that budget number, it would be a 2.4 reduction. I don't think that's 2.4% reduction in general fund. I don't think that's too much to ask, but it may not pass. I'm just saying,
Again, Councilmember Gibson, the staff have done their best guesstimate, right? And so if there are specific items that are contained within the budget after you've taken a look at all of the descriptions and things of that nature and gotten any clarification that you need regarding what item is in the budget that you would like to propose be cut, that is something that would be needed to be discussed as part of reconciliation. Councilmember Siemens, did you want to chime in on this point?
If I may, thank you. And I would just say that I appreciate Councilmember Gibson's suggestion, but I think that I think at this point in time, is the wrong time for that, because staff has put in a lot of work in this budget. But I think there are, as the mayor has pointed out, ways that we can make reductions with specific items. And if there are questions that you might need about certain things that would go towards your goal of reducing things, and you need some help from staff members on that, I would suggest that you have a concise list of questions for staff members that would help you to understand some of the areas where that might happen. I think it's unfortunate that we're at this point in time when a kind of an across-the-board percentage decrease in all the departments is being discussed by the council because it's too late in the process. It's again something that we can discuss for next year, or maybe it's something that you might want to bring up to the council for a recommended modification of the budget later in the year. But I think right now it just is unreasonable from just a staff time perspective. So and again, there's a reconciliation budget, and if you wanted to put that on the reconciliation list, I don't think it would get very far with the entire council, but that's just my opinion, not everybody's. You could say that you want to see on the reconciliation, you want to see a 1% reduction across the board or something like that, then take your shot at it. You're in charge of your seat, so go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this whole package of questions a bit also, and I will probably be submitting some questions to the effect of there's two other pieces here. One, you mentioned the reserves, and so the reserves, but also the and give me a moment. Councilmember Gibson has mentioned reductions in particular programs, presumably not small ones. That's not, in my mind, something that's not a short term, let's do this in the next 2 weeks. And another one that's not a short term, let's do it in the next 2 weeks, is additional revenues. So I had been thinking, just throw this out as a concept, to attach to the budget ordinance some specific assignments, if you will, for the staff to look at over the next certain amount of time before the next budget. Look at these three revenue sources and see if they make sense, and let us decide, outside of the time pressure of having to set the tax rate and budget right now, whether we want to make a major program allocation, whether we want to make put a big focus on an additional revenue source. So that was the way just so everybody knows where I'm at, that's the way I was thinking about it, because we can't ignore these things, and it never seems to be the right time. But maybe this is the way to approach it, because I have also felt for some time, wouldn't it be great if we could expand this and shrink that, but you can't do that. I can't do that right on the spot. So that's my thought. That's it. Thank you.
And Councilmember DeBala, I think that you've raised a good point. If there, because it also aligns with our priority regarding fiscal health and the long term. Yeah. It all goes back to the priorities, right? And getting these work groups together and getting folks to roll up their sleeves and do the work. So, we did establish a goal of a longer term plans for the fiscal health of the city. So if those are certain things that council, small bites that council would like to see happen over the course of that fiscal year to kind of help with furthering those priorities, I think we can definitely have conversations around including some of those aspects as part of our final resolution on the budget. Okay. All right. So I see no more lights. Again, I would like to thank staff and the city clerk and our acting deputy city manager for all of the work that you all have been doing on this budget. I can't stress enough how this conversation has been extremely helpful and well-focused. And definitely, we're off to a good start, right? So look forward to seeing some of you again on Wednesday. All right, so I would like to adjourn this meeting. Do you have a second? All right, let's call it a night.